So my first video was on overthinking, and you'll be able to find that on my page if you haven't already seen it, how it doesn't exist. I explain why it doesn't exist, and that it's just a label. Like a lot of mental health, what people call problems or conditions, maybe a doctor or a psychologist would say that you have a condition. Could be anxiety, depression, OCD is a very popular one. So I thought maybe we could start covering some of these labels. So OCD is one that is becoming very, very popular, along with ADHD. So I've got OCD. I hear that a lot. That's not strictly true. I'll explain why. So I know anybody that labels themselves as having OCD won't like what I'm about to say, but I'm not here to please people. I'm here to tell them the truth. So first of all, like any mental health, condition, we need to explore its title and what it means. So OCD, which is short for obsessive compulsive disorder, a lot of people will just take that as one whole thing, obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, they'll shorten it and say, I've got it. So first of all, what is OCD? So it's easy to look at the word obsession to begin with. So an obsession is something you do a lot. That's what an obsession. So when somebody's obsessed with something, they do it a lot. That's okay. That's what that is. So the next bit is, so we've got the compulsion. So obsessive compulsive. So the compulsion is the feeling driven to do something. So when someone has a compulsion, it means that they are driven to do whatever it is that they're doing. And it almost seems like that they have no control over whatever that is. So they do something a lot and they seemingly don't have any control over it. And everybody knows what a disorder is. It's something that interrupts order. So it's what most people will call a normal functioning existence for somebody. So being able to go to work, get up, get dressed, do basic functions in your life, anything that interrupts that cycle, if it's obsessive and compulsive, it's then classed as disorderly, because I can no longer hold a job down, because I have these compulsions that interrupt my flow. And so if you go to a doctor and they label you with obsessive compulsive disorder and say you have OCD, then they are being very misleading, because what is actually the case is that you choose to employ that behavior. It might not seem like it at the time, but it's always a choice. So you have developed the obsession. You have developed the compulsion, and you have developed the disorder. So it doesn't happen to you. So a lot of people think that OCD happens to you. It doesn't, it happens from you. You do what people call OCD. Now, in order to understand it, if you do it, the first thing and the first step in understanding OCD is accepting that you do it. Because otherwise, you're going to adopt a victim mentality, which means that you have no control. And where you have no control over something, you will see no good reason to investigate, to do something about it. So you are a victim in that sense, and then unable to help yourself. Now, if you accept that you do OCD, it happens from you and not to you. So this isn't you catching a cold. This is you developing a pattern of behaviour that actually doesn't do what you expect it to do. So it's a misunderstanding. So if, for example, you have an obsession with light switches, which I've heard a lot of people do, they have to switch them off and then recheck them and recheck them again. Did I do that right? Did I do that? Have I put this right? Have I done this? And they get a habit. So before someone leaves the house, if they're suffering with OCD, it could manifest in cleanliness, with perfectionism on how they keep the house. There's all reasons for that. But what I want to cover here is just something a little bit more basic, otherwise the video will go on for too long. So just take light switches, for example, that someone has an obsession with them, and before they go out and leave the house, they have to check and recheck and recheck before they get into the car and drive to the supermarket. Now, I can tell you how OCD, the habit, comes about. It is from low self-esteem, which is constantly doubting yourself, which can then lead to confusion, but we're not talking about confusion now. We'll draw the line at doubt, and you can see clearly how it manifests when somebody has to recheck something to see if they've done it right. Okay, so that's what the obsession is, that they do something repeatedly, right? So that comes about because they doubt themselves that they've done it right the first time. So it's clear that an obsession develops through doubt. I don't know whether I switched that off. I don't know whether I did that. I'll have to recheck it. It doesn't feel right. I didn't do it right. Okay, so that's where that comes from. The compulsion to actually carry out the switching the switch is developed from a misunderstanding, which is the idea that by doing that, it's going to solve a problem. Now, there is no problem in the first place to be solved. However, the individual believes that there is, and that is through the constant battle of beating themselves up. In the negative sense, they are criticizing themselves, and they have developed a pattern of thinking that creates a level of suffering, and it manifests in a way where they develop issues with their confidence, essentially. And through lack of confidence, we have an obsession, which would be switching the switches off, whatever that is. It can be anything, but we'll just go with that example for now. Then the compulsion to do that is driven by the idea that by switching the switches that many times, it's going to alleviate their suffering. So it's going to help. It never does. It exacerbates it. It makes it worse. And then what happens is they end up having to take medication, because the suffering starts to cause that much damage to their psychology and eventually their brain, that they then feel that they need medication. So understanding that you do OCD, that it's developed from low self-esteem, the obsession is brought upon by low self-esteem, so the repeated behaviour, the compulsion, which is the drive that I feel I need to do this activity, is driven by a misunderstanding, which is an idea that that activity is going to alleviate the suffering. And then the disorder that comes from that is, well, you never end up getting to work, because you drive down the road and you've got to come back again to check you've switched all the switches off in the house and you've done it correctly. You've not left anything on, And you can obviously throw worrying with that as well, then, because you're worrying that you haven't done it right. But the crux of it is OCD is nothing more than a manifestation of low self-esteem, and the way to address it is always to look at exactly what's going on, and dealing with the root cause. And the root cause is a lack in your confidence. So you need to understand what confidence is, how to employ it, and how to build yourself back up again, so that these behaviors leave you, which is very, very possible, by the way. I've suffered with it myself. For me, it wasn't light switches. I was obsessed with other things, but it's always the same pattern of behavior in the mind. The subject might be different. So it could be numbers, it could be cleanliness, it could be light switches, it could be anything that you become obsessed with, whatever your poison of choice is, really. But the root cause of the habit that you do, that is OCD, is low self-esteem. So if you've got any questions that you want answering, I don't know how this works because it's my first time streaming, but a lot of people say like and subscribe, and wherever that bell is that you press, get pressing it so that I can speak to you more. So speak to you later. Bye.